Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Deployed Engineer podcast. I'm very excited today to have Eduardo Portella in the podcast as my guest and looking forward to learning from him. Eduardo has a very interesting background. He's a biologist who found love for tech and he started writing software since he was 8 years old. Eduardo initially started doing a lot of analysis for big infra projects on the biology side for really big companies and some of the things he's done is like a nuclear hydropower. He also was working to introduce tech in that company thereafter. He had his own company, his own startup, and he thought boomers were using old technology with pen and paper. And so he thought, time for a change. And he introduced a lot of newer tools and technology there and did a company. One of his other interesting projects was around the Federal University near the Rio de Janeiro, where there's the Olympics jazz and yeah. So Eduardo, I got to know Eduardo because he was a technology manager at one of the largest logistics companies in Canada, and I learned a lot from him. Ever since, he's been a director at a bigger director of software engineering at bigger companies. One of them was helping students find universities and apply to them and make it seamless. And Eduardo was driving the initiatives there to make the platform seamless at a leadership position. Thereafter, Eduardo worked on other roles, and most recently he's a director of software engineering and AI at a company that's doing AI for automotive industries in the ad tech space. And it's just amazing. And every time I've talked to him, learned so much. So I'm looking forward to extracting insight and squeezing out all the wisdom from him. Yeah, Eduardo, you could add on to that if there's anything.
Thank you, Bolik, for this nice introduction. It's good to see you again since we we met in real person, September, October, something like this, right?
Yeah.
And that conversation has been long overdue. So thank you for inviting me for that. Yeah. So Bolik said a lot already. I kind of started when I was 8, before the dinosaurs, on an Apple II Plus, not doing anything fantastic, but just playing around with Apple Basic. I actually graduated as a biologist, and I've worked, my first big work, work on a big company was, I was invited by a friend to work on a gas pipeline environmental assessment. And as a biologist, I just needed to go and drive for 1,000 kilometers and try to pinpoint every single house that would be near. So we had enough information to decide over the big buffer that we had if the pipeline would be better to be a few meters away or something, because guys, gas pipelines go boom. So
Oh, yeah.
the least amount of people that you have, the better. And by doing this, I tried to find a better way for me to work. And I started working with GIS. I helped introduce GIS to that company at the time, and forward help, like every single project was using that. I can say that myself and a few other people were responsible for basically introducing GIS before Google Earth, right? The geographic information systems, to the Brazilian government and the Ministry of Energy, mines and energy there, and environment as well. After that, as you said, I had my own startup in 2013 called Bold Anchors, where I had that opportunity of meeting a lot of people working for oil companies, energy generation and energy transmission, knowing a lot of people in the government too. And I found out that many of the engineering companies, they were owned by boomers that knew nothing about technology. And there were a lot of opportunities to cut costs and cut time in terms of uh, adding technology to remote sensing and doing simple things like giving people forms. They could like interview people, and when they are in a hotel, just press send, and someone in the office would have that. And some of the projects, as you said, like nuclear power plants, hydropower plants, transmission lines, railroads, and things, would take a lot of time. People outside of the office, right? And sometimes in places they are not really easy to get. So that was the initial idea. My company kind of picked on during the Olympics when we were doing a job for the at the time the Federal Agency of Ports and Infrastructure. It was me and together with the University of Federal University in Rio, where we were doing remote sensing and environmental assessment of the activities that was during the Olympics. It was a very interesting project, a big project. There were like 200 people working on this. Later on, I came to Canada. You have like as a CEO, my company was small and it was like project based, right? So as a CEO, I came to Canada, became a technology manager, which is a British term, right? And that's where we met. And after that, I've been going from company to company, trying to implement the best way, the best process for engineers to best their companies.
That's a interesting journey because a lot of people, they go through the pure tech journey and they've never experienced a different world before that. And so you have a unique lens on how to approach projects. So yeah, one of the things that I wanted to dive into was to really like ask, a lot more about leadership and how you go about like, what's your style of leadership, right? Every person has a different way of leading people, and I found yours to be something that I really enjoyed myself. Perhaps you could give us a framework because it's hard to see from the bottom, so I want to see from top down.
Cool, cool, yeah. So I tend to say that I'm a servant leader. The first time I heard that, it is a funny thing, right? Like there are a few things that we know that we don't name, and suddenly someone smarter than you or more careful or that has extra time sometimes, they sit down and think and they kind of put together uh, some paper or some blog or whatever and name things. So the first time I heard the term servant leadership was on a Google document that I found through uh, a, a blog post. I don't remember exactly the name, but it had to do with the flow, right, from lean process. And the guy was talking about servant leadership and what he thought about, and he created very solid foundation. And I resonated with that, right? And basically what it is, at least for me, right? What is be a servant leader? Well, first of all, it's be on the factory floor, not on the penthouse, right? It's be together with your engineers. Is you cannot have leaders, so-called leaders, that stay away and they come and they say that they are mentoring, or if they are not together with the people that they are leading, right? I don't like to be called boss or anything like this. I'm there to serve. I'm there to help them, unblock them. And most important, my goal is always to become useless in the organization. Because if people are enabled, they will take the responsibility. And that's the important point, right? A lot of companies, a lot of people, there is a lot of discussion about accountability. You need to make your people accountable, right? And you see like job descriptions and companies like come to our culture of accountability. No one talks about enablement, right? There is no accountability if I'm not enabled, if I don't have the proper tools, the proper training, and sometimes even the possibility of making decisions, right? Most places, they want you to be accountable for something that sometimes you don't believe, or something that you didn't participate on the decisions, or you cannot change. You always need to ask for permission. And I don't think that's a good approach, right? I'd rather have
Right.
people that take decisions, that are not afraid of mistakes, that share and communicate. And communication is very important. So what we call a framework is basically be there, participate as much as possible in technical discussions and help people grow, right? Like yourself, you're like one of the most amazing engineers that I've worked with. And right? You probably did more than I did in my whole life already. So
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, so, when you're, narrowing down a little bit, so you join an organization, right, in such a role, like, unlike being like a coder, you kind of have a framework and you start out writing the code and you download the code and you gotta get through these tickets and stuff. Like, when it comes to like a role like that, like, how does it work day to day? I'm just curious.
so I think the most important thing that you have to do when you join um, a company on a leadership position is, well, you have to create a good environment. Like you have to present yourself. I do a lot of interviewing. It's like you have to do one-on-ones with your peers, right? The people you work with, your direct reports and their direct reports. And yeah, we can call one-on-ones, but I call interviews. I want to know what are the pain points, right? To try to understand what is the company, because it, like, when you're being hired or someone calls you to do a job in any company, they only say good things. And we know that it doesn't work this way, right? Every single company, it doesn't matter how good they are, there are pain points, there are considerations, are, especially if it was a startup, right? I think I tend to say that one of my specialties is this transition from startup to scale up. And that transition I call the ugly teenager phase, right? It's like you still do things like a kid, a startup. You want to be big, but you don't know how. Your ears grow faster than your nose, or your nose grows faster than the rest of your face. So it's an ugly teenager phase, and it takes a while. It's not on the snap, right? So you do need to understand what brought the company to the point you are and joining, and who are the people who contribute the most. And there is a lot of caveats there. We can talk a little bit about that. And who are the new people? Where are the clashes? Because there's always clashes, right? The C-suites, they want to move forward, but it's not always they have the right people that came in for that move forward approach. So it's about interviewing people. I do download the code. My brother has a story. My family, like my two brothers, they are software developers. They live in UK. My middle brother is someone kind of famous in there as well, and he has that story about the cupboards, right? Which is basically like, if you want to be useful, you should spend some time. And I tell this to all my developers, right? Do you know what team A or B is doing? Do you know what they do? What is the code base or whatever, right? So go and take a look. Clone the repository. Take a look. Try to understand. That's good because it gives you insight. That's good because in the event of a issue or something like this, you can contribute more than just what your domain is about, right? And every single company have like those weird repositories that no one owns, no
Yeah.
one's known about, but they tend to break. And by doing this, so I do that as well. What I try to do is like a mental map of what can I act immediate, what needs more time, what can I be strategic, what can I do now that will affect A, B, or C in the near future. A lot of my thought process, right, it has to do with the strategy, right? So there are gains that are immediate, and most people focus only on that. I don't care about immediate gains because I know they exist. I know there are other people thinking about. In engineering organizations, there is this balance between tech debt and product work that you have to do.
Right.
So how can we manage to put them together and move forward? That's the strategy that I'm talking about, right? How can I implementing today, can I be more efficient in 6 months, 1 year? I don't care about 2 years from now, right? Things change. I don't think that in our environment, software developer, startups and things, you should be too much worried about 2 years from now, but have a plan. So
Interesting.
Yeah, it's about intervening, trying to understand what all the different clashes, the clashes that exist inside of the company, and there are always many of them.
I see. I guess what I see what you mean. It's like basically trying to talk to different people in the company to understand, what's going on and to understand the broader picture of what's going on inside, to understand the pain and where you can contribute, and basically aligning your team to get to what the company kind of wants, right?
So one of the things that I've gained a lot of experience having my own company back in Brazil and closing contracts with like old engineers that were used to pen and paper, right? Is that your clients, your stakeholders, they don't know what they want. So you need to help them go in the direction. They might have good ideas, they might have some directions. It's very clear that, and that's how it should be, right? Like a CEO, a CTO, they need to give a direction. How we get there will change throughout the time. It's like babe steps. My stepdad from Michigan was an exchange student in Michigan. He used to say, have a 5-year plan that you can change in 5 minutes, right? That's very important. So basically tells you, yeah, you have a goal, but you're not too tight because life is hard and sometimes it comes in weird shades, right? And you have to adapt yourself. So you have like the famous founder syndrome, right? I've gone through companies that had like very strong founder syndrome. Those are the ones that fail, right? Like a CTO, a CEO, they need to give directions and have the people below them kind of driving in the specific boxes they ran the plan to move forward, right? So yeah, there is a lot of conflicting things and you have to find. And this approach of meeting people, understanding what they have, has also to do with one thing that I tell developers, right? I call the support circle. So when you join a company as a junior, intermediate developer, or even a senior developer, you have your support group that's direct, which is the team you join, your manager, your senior manager, etc. But that should never be the only people you rely on or that you are available to. If you are on a front end team, you're a front end developer, you should definitely make friends, right? Create this support circle on the back end, on the infrastructure, on the SRE, where you can. And when I say make friends, it's like make friends, go meet with them, interview them, try to like have one-on-ones, have like conversations. They can help you a lot, right? That's a thing that helped me a lot when I came to Canada as well. Back in my early beginnings here, I was very lucky to be in a place where a lot of people was in the same situation, and they were like distributed in different teams, and everyone has an expertise. So I've learned a lot. I contribute a lot outside of my teams. I help drive and change the path of the company at the time. And that's good, right? That's good for your career. But most important is what I also mentioned to people. It's like, I don't expect that an engineer will work forever in the same company. So you have to learn in every place you work. You have to learn as much as possible about anything that can help you on your next job or your next position.
I think I really agree because I think this way, like being in person sometimes is a good thing versus being remote, is because you could have that something biological or just going and bumping into somebody on
Yeah,
the even when you're
the
right.
coffee machine, right?
Exactly. Like I made more friends at the coffee machine than I ever made, when I went remote. And I really miss that aspect. It's also harder, I think, to like connect remotely. But unfortunately, unfortunately, like, we've all been now exposed to a lot more remote work. Some people are fully remote. Um, do you have any tips for like people who are like very remote but want to do that? Because I think the other side, there's a way you could talk to people more naturally, but with remote, it's like some random person nudged me, So, have you seen that work?
Yeah, so I do agree having the in person is very good. I think especially here in Canada, I think one of the things that are happening a lot is, and it's funny, I live in Oakville, Ontario. It's a train ride to Toronto downtown. It's like 30, 40 minutes, depending on the day, depending on the train you get. And every single company is doing the same. It's like Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Right. So I think there was a balance there. As soon as COVID hit and we went all remote, the first thing I did was I'm going to have a Google link that I will make sure everyone knows that I'm there. And I had that 100% of the time open, unless I was in a different meeting. So that I didn't know what I was doing specifically, but even though I've worked remote most of my life, my company was a remote company, especially because I wasn't hiring people permanently. It was more project based. And so people like we would meet, we would talk, we would do things. So I've been doing remote work since 2013. My brother, as I said, told you, I think it was the first remote company in UK he had. It was a cooperative of developers. And they have a good story about this because at the time, early 2000s, mid 2000s, it was factory developers, software, no? It was, software factory. Most companies call themselves software factory. And my brother's company was called, it was engineering, right? Software engineering. And they had kind of created a whole branding based on engineering, right? Something that we can also talk about. But so I'm used to remote. Remote was never a problem, but when COVID came, I had two big teams, the infrastructure, backend, and I had a lot of participation with other teams like mobile, different areas of the company. And having that channel open for, it's like the open door policy, right? Like my door is always open. You like don't even need to DM, just jump in. There might be other people on the, and what ended up happening was that it was kind of a hub. People would jump in and end up talking with other people that was in the channel. So it was constantly there. Now, like you said, I do miss, I like the idea of meeting people. And when you go to the office, that was what should be, right? I'm going to tell you about not so recent experience, but it was kind of a gray area in my career where I joined a company and I wasn't very happy. I called out and I left the company that had like the 3 days a week, right? But every time I was in the office, when we were doing meetings, people were sitting down on their own chair, own tables and not meeting in person. Like, why am I here? So
Yeah.
don't waste. I think the in office should not be taken lightly in terms of interactions, right? People should uh, organized teams should organize themselves to have like the most important meetings or uh, uh, they have for their teams specific, like if you're working with product engineering, you need to have like product engineering together, UI, UX, and have like the kickoff meetings for projects or ideation meetings, or what I like to call the rubber ducking meetings as well for engineering. How are we going to implement this? Have people, have a drawing board, have stick notes,
Taking
right? Have do a little bit of this because that helps, I think. So I'm a big fan of remote work. I like be present. You can see I talk a lot. I like talking with people. So I don't think it's a big problem now having this hybrid mode.
Yeah,
You're
I
doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, totally. I find that interesting when you said, okay, you had this, Google one open, and it almost feels like an open door. I first time I'm hearing, but I can imagine if tech leaders can, have a hour or two and just be like, hey guys, this is open between this, and you can just hop on anytime. And I think that would be, I've never thought about that, but that's a really good way of
Yeah.
getting people.
One thing that I try to make sure with the people I work with is that there is this tendency of, yeah, I need to talk to you, but our one-on-one is in 3 days. So I'll be waiting. They don't even come, right? And sometimes 3 days is too late, or maybe something that's bothering you or something that's blocking you. And when you're leading teams with different levels, different people, especially here in Canada, where you have like a lot of different backgrounds, right? Led a team in India. So culturally, there's a lot of differences, right? There's a lot of different expectations. The same way when you go to Brazil, developers and Brazilians will be different, or work with Argentinians or whatever. There are different expectations, right? And what I tell people is like, yeah, we have like that official time in a week or every 2 weeks that you can come and we should talk. But what I end up doing all the time is like half an hour before, say, hey, we have a talk. Do you have anything? Yeah? No? Okay, cool. We can meet again. Remember, you don't need this time. Come to me anytime you want. DM me, ask questions if you need to talk or come online, or we're going to meet tomorrow in the office. I will stop whatever, right? I tend to, my back to my servant leadership. The most important part of the company is the factory floor, is the people who actually do work, is the people that actually drive the company forward, right? If you strip all the leadership, the company still produce value. If you strip all the factory floor, the company doesn't produce anything, right? Just
That's
meetings, useless meetings,
that.
lots of useless meetings. So I will ignore, get out early of any meeting if it's not driven by me, if it's not something important that I have a fundamental part there, I will completely drop that meeting to meet the people I work with, which in my opinion is more important. And come to me with any problems, right? Like, oh, I had a lot of people come to me say, hey, I'm going to have a baby. And I could see on the person's eyes that they were like, hey, you have a daughter, you know? Uh,
Right.
Tell me about your experience because I'm freaking out, right? So, yeah, we don't need to talk only exclusively about work. Talk about anything. Tell me what I can do to make your life better. That's my main goal there.
Yeah, and so like narrowing down to that, when you're talking to people, right, you've got a array of people. People are different. And how do you like do like difficult meetings with somebody? Like, do you have a way? Because sometimes like there are times when companies or leadership have to, cut down or and as a leader, you're put in position. And I'm asking this because I'm thinking about those people who might want to lead in the future, and they have to be in such a position. Is there like a framework like that you use, like what's a way that works that?
A So that's an interesting question, right? I There is a comparison I think that you can like look at how you broke up relationships, right? There is never good ways. I think the best way is transparency, right? And I think it was yesterday I was watching, going blindly on Instagram here, reels or something like this, and there was this guy talking about how your brain works, and that's something important for me, right? I like the past two courses that I've done in terms of getting better on my role, they had a lot to do with psychology as well. There were a senior leadership program in Oxford University. I would say that half of the content has to do with psychology, even though it's not state, it is psychology, right? It is about how different generations work and what they drive, what drives them, and things like this. So you have to be very aware with whom about culture. There are a lot of things that are, even for me, I know sometimes even talking with like superiors, like CTOs and VPs or whatever, right? If I don't understand, I tend to ask, right? So for me, my framework is about transparency, is about asking questions. Do you understand what I mean? Right? Try to get as much as possible from the person, but especially being human. I think when you have to let people go, or if someone is having a tough time in a company, meaning the general impression is that that person is not executing their duties or is not producing as much as, and production is kind of a weird term for that, but they're not performing as well, right? There is always two sides, right? Uh, we had we had a colleague back when we worked together. That was a person, that was a brainiac, fantastic developer, fantastic DevOps. That person was kind of left forgotten by leadership, and that's bad. That's a bad thing, right? And then that person came to me afterwards. Like people say, "Hey, we were having problems. We had like two pips with that person. Can you take care of and see if you can fix it or if we have to let that person go?" It's the third strike, right? And I said, "Yeah, sure. Let's sit down." And I think the first thing was like acknowledging. First thing I had, my first conversation with that person was acknowledging what the company has done wrong to him. But at the same time saying, "Hey, the company has done that, but at the same time, you got used to that. Now we need to fix, and here's the expectations." So I'm happy to say that while I was there in the company, that worked out. We didn't need to let the person go. And that's why I'm in the position I am. That's one of the things that I like, right? I have two things that I'm completely passionate. One is making good friends, having a good environment, enabling people. The other one is architecture.
That's I think great. Okay, so I want to segue into like something around interviewing. So at the moment, the job market has been very
Right.
weird, and I'm sure you're instances where you've posted. There's so many people. What's making folks stand out? Like from the time they apply, what are some tips that you have for people who are looking?
Yeah. So the market is very weird right now, right? Like I have opened a few positions in the past 6 months, and you need like half an hour to have like 500 people applying, right? That's due because of two things. One, AI. And second, Canada was through a kind of this blank recession last year. Things are different exactly now, right? There's a lot of positions coming up, a lot of people investing in different things. AI is a big thing. People have no idea about what really is working with AI. Most of people, most companies, most CEOs and CTOs, and they just say AI. It's the buzzword, right? And but at the same time, AI is the reason. One of the reasons things are so chaotic for hiring. There is a lot of fake positions opening, right? And people ask me why. Well, why? Well, because they want to steal your information when you send your resume. They want to lead you on a paywall, and you're desperate because of work you will pay and we'll never heard about that person again. And on the other side, there is stories, right? And I have a story that actually happened with one of my recruiters where he was talking to a lady, and mid phrase, her voice changed from a woman's voice to a man's voice, right? That's AI for you. So he was giving the thumbs up, was in the hand of the conversation to start moving. So two things that I have been doing is the first one to interview my candidates. And I don't have like that really narrow process, step one, two, and three. When I interview, it's more about just like the conversation we're having now. It's like, I want to know about you. I want to know what you do, and try to read the person, right? If possible, do that in real life, not online, which changes a lot of things, right? Like if you're doing hybrid, that guarantees that the person can get to the office, right? So you meet the person in the office, you talk, you can read their gestures and how the person position themselves. So don't use AI on your resume, right? I think
Right.
I think it's super important. Like most companies, they are using AI for filtering candidates. So if you're gonna use AI for your resume, make sure you don't like everything with AI. Don't say do this and copy and paste into your resume, right? Like
Right.
write yourself and say, hey, can you improve? Can you correct? Or this is the goal of this specific resume, right? I think that's the important thing. Be human.
Yeah. What about in terms of like technical ability? Because So you have 5, 6, 10 engineers applying, right? What are some things you're looking for in concrete on the resume as an example? Because you cannot hire 10, you have one position, you have
Mhm.
10 good people. What makes one stand out? Is it years of experience? Is it, do you do a lead code interview or do you have a take home? What's your style? Because I know there's no right or wrong.
Yeah. So what we have been doing, and it's my personal preference, is the take home. The candidate will receive kind of a prompt. Here's what we're expecting. We have our own expectations that we don't share, right? Like proper logging, the person being able to create a proper README that explains everything to make the project run, and the 4 days, right? Some people will say, yeah, but with AI now it's super easy, right? The go and do, but yeah, you will have to sit down, make it run, explain your choices, and I think that's the important thing. Part of I don't participate on that process specifically. Get like the engineers and leads to do that, depending on the area. My AI team, for instance, we had a specific prompt like fetch information from websites and this and that and create whatever, right? For backend, we have like using the stack, uh, Java or this framework or etc. Build this, and if you're hiring a junior, a intermediate, or a senior, there are different expectations. But it's very important to see the work, see how the person interacts and can explain what's happening there. I'm fine with people using AI. I don't mind. I use myself, right? I think we've talked about this. It's like sometimes it's like from your phone, right? Like
Yeah.
you tell, I just had an idea. Open this repo, do this and that.
Yeah.
It works. Working the office even more kind of, do we really need this?
Yeah.
I could be in the swimming pool talking with my client on my phone and building real tech, right? But what I tell my developers is to be strategic when they're building stuff. And that's what I expect, right? Like questions I asked when reviewing a process is like, and how about if we go to this? What would you do different, right? So, the project is just kind of a basis to questions that are more important in terms of your knowledge on how to extrapolate what you've done. So there is a completeness, expectations in terms of documentation. Even though I'm a firm believer that the code should document itself,
Right.
people should be able to, the cleanness of the code. Can you read? Make it sense. Like someone that's never seen this before is able to understand, and not that joke, right? The comment on top of the code, like when I wrote this code, there were only two people who knew what that was about, me and God. Now only God knows about it. If you're here
Yeah.
and you have no idea what this method does, add like iterate this number and you have like 2,400 and whatever. It
Yeah.
it needs to be a clean code.
That's fair. What about, do you like look like system design as well? Like, is that something you look out for typically?
Depending on the level we are interviewing for, the position level or the type of position, yes. That's something that when I'm interviewing, I ask a lot, right? There are some weird things, Boli, that if you ask, sometimes even people that call themselves senior, you see immediately that the person have no idea. Like we said, I started playing with code when I was 8. When I started, like later on, I would be playing with like Visual Basic and things like this, working with GIS, and I started learning Python, and Python is freakish amazing language for you to start. But at the same time, Python it's too open, right? And I've learned code basically by myself, experimenting, playing around, but reading a lot. Had between 2005 and 2010, I read like 1,500, 2,000 books on technology and like everything that I could find. Right. And I would say that I have a good experience with foundations, like design patterns. Right. So Sometimes you ask about, tell me about your simple question, right? Let's talk about design patterns. Tell me about like what you have implemented before and why. And you get a lot of like senior people that don't understand or never seen it before because it was very organic learning. Not saying that they're not good engineers, but I think there are a few things that misses there. And that's the same thing with like architecture and system design. If you've seen, if you read about, if you're understanding what you're talking about, it's easy to know when you ask questions. I would say it really, and when you interview a few people already, especially if they're coming from specific companies, you know exactly what the company is about, right?
Right.
Because, and that's one of the things that I tend to like my rubber ducking meetings that I do with my developers is always to bring those concepts, right? Like architecture, system design, why we should do A or B, when we should do A or B, because I would say that everything is valid, right? Depending on your requirements and the time you have. So
Okay. Yeah, that gives a good insight. So building on that, like, once you have somebody, right? Like this where like I'm asking probably for myself and people who are a little more in the senior roles now trying to, go decide like, okay, what are some things that they could do to get into maybe more managerial positions in the future, or whether that shouldn't even be an aspiration, it should just come naturally. Like, how do you think about that? Because I think there was a time we were chatting and you gave an interesting insight about, the idea of leadership pushing a person who is very technical into a role where they totally lose the technical and they're now lashing that out. So what's your, like, what should the compass be for people,
that's a super interesting thing because I myself had suffered from bad leaders, right? That what you're describing is the Peter Principle. So there's this book from late 60s called Peter Principle, where in the nutshell, it states that companies tend to promote their people to the top of their incompetence, right? Meaning, and that's one of the reasons you have the Y career, or some people call T career, etc. Right? So, and it's very clear on the software engineering, especially because software engineering is not as old as civil engineering, or so it like sometimes you need someone to lead a team, and the only group you have is engineers who have zero experience in leading people, and that's also very interesting because what you do, what you study, uh, kind of wire up your brain. We were talking about the plasticity of the brain. So if you do math, your brain will be better and better in doing math, right? And maybe that evolution, that improvement will take some, it doesn't block you from learning other skills, but if you're only doing one thing, that's the thing that you're going to be good, but you're not evolving other things. So it's very common to have Peters, and you can see this when you have team leads over, right? You will have a lot of Peters in a lot of companies. I've met tons of them. I suffered because of them. That term of Peter Principle is a very interesting term in my life, I think.
Mhm.
What I do as a leader to help this and what people should do, right? I always like to introduce a concept called project leads in my teams. It doesn't matter if you're a junior, if you're intermediate or a senior, you have to lead projects. Leadership is not about only of like telling people what to do. It's more about knowing who are your stakeholders, what is important for them. So I like to have teams that I've worked and worked very well. I like to have every single individual assigned to a project where I'm there to help as much as possible. Again, my objective is to become useless in the company. I can be in every meeting if you want, but I want you to grow your muscles, your brain into be able to communicate with the stakeholders, whether they are product, other engineer teams, or whatever. Sit down, plan with them, bring the requirements, discuss with the team, plan, help put that on the board, and sometimes even manage other people, peers, to get this done, right? And it should be something that every company should do, because eventually we'll need a manager, you will need something, and as earlier you do, the better that works. That cuts down. People love to talk, right? Companies love to talk flat. There is a lot of things in our chosen area of work that people don't understand, right? A lot of buzzwords. So the flat organization, it's about this, right? But companies say, yeah, we have a flat organization. So we have the CTO and then managers and the teams. And the manager, it's like the in between. You have like a bunch of people working for them, the CTO on top, and he has to deal with the requirements or the complaints or the direction changes and the team to get things done. It's much better when every single person in your team can take different roles. Like with a team of 4, you can easily have 2 projects going concurrently with this strategy, sometimes 3, right? And have really good results, right? It takes a while. Nothing in life, it's immediately. It works. We're not working in the company anymore, but my teams, we were so efficient that I made an agreement with them. No one works on, like we were only working 4 days a week. Fridays, the only person that would be present in the company, especially because we were not doing the Friday deployments, right, was myself and whoever was on call, right? And that's like 2 teams, backend and infrastructure. And people would come, are you sure? So I had one of the DevOps, the infrastructure engineers, come in and say, hey, are you sure? Like, can I go do dirt park biking next Friday? Yeah, sure. Is everything done?
Right.
Everything that we agreed with other teams, everything that we agreed with product, our timeline in terms of delivery working. Yes, I don't see why. But my expectations too was that people would do whatever they needed to get things done. And that's a good thing about that. That's one of the balances between remote and in-person work. Like people need to go from their homes to work, right? Myself working in downtown Toronto, I have 30 something minutes. There is a train schedule and I want to get to my people, right? My family. When I work from home, if it's like 5, I can easily go to 6, 6:30, right? When I'm working in the office, I can't, right? Like not every day I can do. Anyways, so I think the getting people from that area of leadership is the earliest as possible. Go ask your manager, can I lead a project? Can I do this? If you have interest, and it's rare to get people that want to lead. Most of the time they go Peter Principle because that's the only opportunity for growth, right? That's why companies work with iCareers. You have like that transition point where you can, as a senior, you can continue as a senior or become a team lead. Then if you choose team lead, you're going to be a manager, senior manager. Yeah. So I think people, one of the things that I do, it's like on one-on-ones is always, I ask people, right? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, right? And many engineers, they say, I want to be a senior if they're too young, or I want to be working with specific technologies. I want to be a principal or a staff developer. Rarely you see people saying, I want to be a manager, right? And I ask, and how about management? And people, oh, I'm not good with people. And I say, okay, so shame on you. Here's the thing. To become a senior, you have to interact with people, right? You will have to lead projects. You need to learn. You need to, and I totally respect people who doesn't feel confident talking in public, but that's something that I'm there to help, right? Brown bags. So I created brown bags, and every single company I go, I create brown bags. The ultimate reason is like share of knowledge, but also getting people into speaking, right? speaking
Mm.
publicly, showcasing things that they like, things that they have done, and so on, right? That's a muscle that you have to exercise. Getting people to manage project or interface directly with product, UX, other stakeholders, that's very important. I've never worked in companies that do this, but I think that's a good thing too. There was a company that worked with studios. I had some conversations with them on the 3D side of video editing and things like this, that they actually had the developers doing at least 2 hours a week of client support, right? Especially because it was a SaaS platform, but there was a lot of like they were like a render farm type of approach and they had like tools. So they would sit down, try to understand what the client is doing. So I think that's a good approach depending on what you do too, right? That engineers should understand what's happening because they can be better. They can do better implementations, right? When they do this. And all of that helps you in your personal life when you're talking or you have to lead something or in your home, but especially in your career as well. Because then you can choose. You don't need to be the lonely principal that lives in the basement that people don't know that you exist, right? You should be there outside, getting in the weeds of requirements, how the company works to make your job better, right? So leadership is important. We have Peter principles everywhere in the leadership, people who has zero experience and they get frustrated, right? I'm not even saying that like bad people or whatever. People who are frustrated because they were pretty good technically, the only opportunity to grow, and no one says no for more money, right? Is becoming a manager. They still do good work because they're technical. They know the direction. They can give good paths. The next step is like being farther away from the technical side. They do learn a little bit about how to manage people, but not that much. And even if they don't realize, right, they are now in a position where they are very incompetent. They haven't had any training. They they don't know how to have like critical conversations with people. They tend to be arrogant. They tend to be and it's very easy. It's like if you see people moving away from that team, asking to go to other team or simply leaving the company, the reason is the manager. It's always the manager. Is whoever is on top, giving direction, making uh, 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 the reviews. That's the person, and it costs a lot. People don't realize this, but a bad manager costs a lot. If you consider the amount of money we spend interviewing people, especially as of now, like we said, it's a crazy market. A lot of people have to stop what they're doing to interview. That's G&A, right? That's not it. That's like direct cost. It's not something that you're building, right? And the whole training and new laptops and things like that's a small amount. Like getting the person, doesn't matter how senior they are, they need to understand the company, they need to understand the stack. It takes a while, and that costs. There is a big cost. So bad managers, they are a black hole. The only problem is it doesn't appear. It doesn't appear on the balance sheet of the company. It doesn't appear.
Yeah. It's a, yeah, no, I think it's so true. Team members that feel safe typically also work extra or they might take more ownerships. I've seen it myself in, when I've worked at various companies. And one thing I related to you, for example, was that, I was like a really junior person, right? But I just felt comfortable doing new things because I'm gradually taking on with more responsibility and projects. There comes the person's adopting risk, right? Like there's a risk as well with taking on a project and fearing that it'll fail and looking like a fool, right? And then, but a person, if the manager makes risk taking a comfortable thing, going out of the, it kind of adds on because then eventually you have a trained person to take on more,
It is.
you
It
know.
is. It is
So
exactly
that's
this. Making people comfortable to make mistakes. That's the important thing, right? It's like, and there are places. right, that have this as part of the expectations of the engineering, right? It's like, especially when you're talking about SaaS platforms that have a very fast turnaround, like food delivery and tickets for airplanes or whatever, right? It's like your end customer comes into the website, does whatever needs to go out, and everything needs to work perfectly. You don't have time. So I've been in war rooms where the person that knew, figure out what was happening, was wasting time explaining, oh no, that happens, and going on a philosophy. And I was like, dude, stop, just fix it. You will have time to explain what happened, right? I'm happy to know that you fix it. Go for it, right? But there's no but. Go. No one does anyone has a better direction. No, do it. We are losing money. And some companies, I've been involved on outages that costed like millions of dollars, right? And it's like no time, right? Like even this, that's a rare skill that only people who've been companies that have a very fast turnaround understand what's happening, right? I love this. For me, there's chaos of, I don't love when the company is losing money, don't take me wrong, but be involved on war rooms and participate and trying to figure out and trying things. That's where you need to take choices because not taking them could mean like I've worked in companies that half an hour was like $500,000, right? It means an extra half an hour. We should have done this half an hour ago. Yeah. So that's $500,000 lost, right?
Yeah, no, that's I like that because it's not like somebody does it with intention. Maybe it's preventable, but just and I've faced that because as I take on more responsibility, something broke, and then you have to write an investigation report and stuff, which is fine. But initially, it feels scary because you're like, oh my God, like should I have even taken this up? But it's a necessary transition because I think everything has outages. Like even massive companies with the best talent have.
especially them, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think I like that way of making that person comfortable to push,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah, just I think a little. I want to just understand, like, with the new I coming in now, and let's. I want to talk about how if there's anything that has changed that you think, or what your predictions are for how things will change if they haven't changed yet. Because AI assisted coding has become very common now. Everyone I talk to in the past 10 episodes, everyone I talk to mentioned that more than 50% of the software they're writing on average is done by AI, and brings a question as to, okay, like if AI is really good at it, does it blur the lines between different roles, or how does it evolve?
That, so that's it's even a weird moment to ask this because I've been asked. That's part of my responsibility. One of mandates when I arrived at my current place was like, you have to decide and give the direction of what we're going to do. So there's a lot of things. I think there is a lot of expectation, especially from people that don't work directly, that AI is this fantastic tool that will make people work 10 times faster and maybe soon enough we can just fire all the engineers. I think that's completely wrong, right? There is a lot of benefit. Yes, I see this because I've been, especially because I have this mandate, I've been testing Claude open code, fantastic tool, open source, by the way. I started using Copilot as soon as it came out, Gemini, anything, right? So I've used many of them, like Cursor. It is an arms race. There's no right answer right now, right? If you're using, unless you want your company to be like switching tools every 3 months, right? Which is a problem, right? It is something because every time, and that's a classic thing, it's very described on literature, that every time you introduce something new, that you expect that there is an increase on performance. What happens immediately is the other way around. There is like a dip because people need to adapt and try to understand, right? And you're only going to see in 3 to 6 months the impact of the tool. Now, the problem is with AI, as I said, it's an arms race. Instead of listening the likes of Elon Musk or Eric Schmidt or whatever that love to say, oh, this is the new thing, right? You have to, again, go to the factory floor and see what people are doing. There is a lot of intelligent people on YouTube that kind of created frameworks to compare models and things like this. To be fair, as of now, if you're working with some of the top models, I wouldn't say that you need to flip the LLM itself. Improvements that can happen there, it's not the most important thing, right? You see with the OpenClaw. What is OpenClaw? It's not an LLM. People, oh, it's AI. It's not AI either, right? It's even some expectations like Python is the big thing. Dude, the entire thing is Node. It's
Yeah.
TypeScript, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, right? I hired a significant amount of AI engineers recently, and my conversations with them, as I told, first warning line was like, "So, what is your expectations?" Right? And I would say, because what I'm looking for is someone that understands microservices, that knows system design, that knows how DBs work, how dynamos and tooling, right? How to build things that you're going to use with AI, right? And that's going to be probably 95% of your work, right? Proper normal engineering. So this whole AI engineering, such a BS, right? Like you need to be a good engineering. You need to
Right.
understand cloud. You need to understand data stores. You need to understand how to do event loops and make sure requests are happening or that's the truth, right? The other 5% will be choices that does have to do with data science and LLMs and things like this, right? Like if you have to distill a model for something specific, right? Or I see a lot of people thinking, oh, yeah, AI, we control whatever information and we'll do the math for you. No, it won't, right? So if you, my engineers, I want people who have some experience with data science, with ML, because if I have data I will have to go through ML to get results, and I will use AI to explain the results, right, to
Right.
my end user. So there is a big thing about this. In terms of coding, as I said, new tools, there is like a dip in it. And I recently sat down with my engineers in the office, and I was asking what the tools are we that we are using made different for you, and they say like definitely in terms of debugging, it's super fast, it's super efficient, right? That's an improvement of life, definitely. Now there is a lot of expectations of people outside of engineer because they can have like Claude or open code, right, connected to a 70 billion parameter model and say, hey, build me a website. And it
Right.
builds. I want it to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it will, right? The thing that people don't understand is that AI is incapable of creating something new. It will always replicate. We'll combine things, sure, but
Mm-hmm.
it does not extrapolate. It inference. It's like based on everything that I was trained, what can I
Yeah.
do? So, and that's where engineers are good for. Like I've done a lot of testing with open code. Now I'm testing Claude bot. And one of my tests is like I give a prompt and I simply ignore everything that's says I do implement. And I want to see with how many iterations, whatever it's done that was working will be broken, right? I've run those like 10 times with different prompts or a few times with the same thing. And in average, after the fifth to seventh time, you ask, oh, implement, it breaks things,
It does.
right?
It does.
So you still need to be a good engineer. And the key word there is engineering, right? I like to make this comparison. Like that's one of the things. Don't tell me you're a software developer. I want you to be a software engineer. And the analogy is with real engineers, right? Let's say you're when I say real engineers, like civil engineers, you
Mm.
don't go, if you're a civil engineer, right? Doesn't matter the pressure. You will make sure the concrete, the, the, the steel scaffolding and the base of your bridge are properly done. It doesn't matter how beautiful the bridge will be, right? Like the architect might have thought on something completely crazy, but the civil engineer is responsible for people's life, right? And that's the thing. AI won't do that. AI was trained in a lot of slop, not AI slop, but people slop. There's a lot of bad things. If you go to GitHub and train on everything there, there's a lot of, I contributed to that. There's like bad code that I wrote in there and I
Yeah.
deleted, but it probably was written on top of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, right? Especially if you know what to ask. Now, again, people say with AI, engineers will become obsolete. I will say that before engineers become obsolete, a lot of companies will become obsolete, right?
That's
I
true.
will kill companies first, then it will actually kill engineers' job.
That's true.
Like imagine you have like my have a home lab, run a bunch of things in my home lab. And I do have an instance of playing around, right? I'm always playing around trying to learn. I do have an instance of, I have my own AIs running on that home lab. Not fantastic, not expensive things, but fine enough, right? Anyone with like a Mac Mini or those cool machines can run really big models right now, not have to pay a single
Dollar.
place for anything, just their own energy bill and the machines, right? Companies like providers, you don't need them. But also, let's give an example companies that crawl websites and get the information. The easiest thing to do today is like go to a model and say, hey, go to this website and find how much that's happening or whatever information. Grab that information, put on the bank for me on a data bank. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can. So companies don't need other companies that do crawl or whatever. So that's a problem already, right? So again, AI is fantastic. You need to know what you're asking. And that's the most important thing I think I'm bringing into my engineers is like, I think Cursor, you can see a dashboard that tells how much of AI code is being committed to your repositories. And like my company is between 39 and 50%. It's a lot, right? And I think that's good. Now, has that created improvements in time? Some, right? The most important thing that I ask them is to be conscious, right? Don't let the AI go haywire. Use as much as code completion as possible and be very conscious about. Make sure you know what you're asking to. And the rubber ducking meetings are essential for that. So we need more of that, right? Like we have to compensate in some place too.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Like, there's more and more concerns I read every day of people. I think there's more outages sometimes these days. And I think I suspect that, people are being bottlenecked by reviewing and, there's like this philosophy where like what you've written is when you write you understand well versus when you just read something, so that naturally translates to a point where like, okay, you're told to do code review but you never wrote it, right? So you might think you've understood something, but the reality is like I wrote code for like in like enterprise for 7 years, like hand coding, what they call hand coding, right? Like even no autocomplete, it was like literally writing the functions and everything. I used to get ideas as I'm typing, right? Like I'm writing it and I'm like drawing out, and it's one function, but it's covered all the edge cases. I've written the test for it, and I know, and 3 months later, if I'm asked what I did, I remembered. Like I remembered how I named it. I knew the tests that failed. And I think that was the state. Now it's like, oh, okay, like 1,000 line pull request, and I'm reviewing it.
You have no idea. The people who is reviewing might be using AI as well, just to say yay or nay.
Yeah.
And I have concerns about this too. So again, it's about be conscious, right? And I think that's the most important takeaway. from this is like make sure your team is conscious about what they're doing, using for so it's the same problem. I have a teenager right at home. Like with AI, every single project could be like a snap, right? Every single essay or but I think there is a lot of good opportunity. Like everything in the world, right? You have nuclear bombs and you have nuclear reactor, you have nuclear medicine, like we are able to see things inside of the body without having to cut open, right? Since 1940s or so, right? Don't quote me on the date. I'm not sure. X-ray was
That
invented,
is,
so it can be used for both things, right? I think AI. I've been talking with a lot of senior people. uh, we have a lot of good friends in companies. They share what's happening, general directions without sharing specific things. But I also have discussions and groups where CEOs, CTOs participate and there are questions and discussions. And what I see is there is a real damaging thing that happens when you have famous CEOs saying crap, right? Or it's taken out of context, or and people get on board on this without having critical thinking, right? Like if you go, there is a lot of companies now who are that they think that they can be 10 times faster just by adding AI, right?
mm,
And it's not good. Yeah, AI can be a good improvement if you go ask ChatGPT about the results of efficiency with AI and make sure you make a good question because it will answer whatever you want. If you have
yeah,
any intent that you're expecting that everything was gone, has been going good, it will give you mostly that. So be very neutral. And I tell everyone and ask, and you'll see that the real studies, proper studies, say that it's a mixed bag. It there is in some specific case there are improvements, in some there aren't. And the most important thing is it's not throwing another thing in your company organization that will make it improve. There are a lot of easy gains from making sure to look at your company organization and the workflows and process are properly sized and properly directed to what is your intention. And that's a process that every company should do all the time, right? The same way the market changes, roadmaps changing, and things like this, the internal structure of the company, the internal what I call the the triggers and like the workflow triggers that move information from factory floor to the top and vice versa. They are they're proper in place. Your organization is working properly, and you're not wasting people's time. People get very attached to process. They go kind of gall on my pressures, right?
yeah,
And sometimes that's what's hurting, right? There is the maximum about like companies, the cons law, right? Companies tend to build software like they are organized, how they
right.
communicate, right? There's a lot of crappy software out there.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. I think that's about mostly what I wanted to cover, and I think I learned a lot today as a good one. Lots of things to take away. I just wanted to ask, do you have any like closing things you wanna, maybe cover in the next 5 minutes or something?
Oh, we went through a lot of things, right, Paulie?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think AI is the important thing, right? It's being important. There are gains and improvements if it's well implemented. Uh, Leadership is something that needs to be brought from the beginning, right? People out there, don't be afraid of leading whatever is your path, whether you're going on the IC, the individual contributor, or people leadership. You will have to lead people. You will have to lead projects. You will have to lead with stakeholders. Knowing, understanding this is very important. Yeah. The other thing is never be afraid of taking decisions. If there is no other, like your decision is taken if there is no other decision. So just do it, right? If no one has a better idea, try yours. What can you do? Make things
yeah,
worse? Yeah, sure. But
totally.
if it's not working, right? At least you tried. And that could be something that actually surfaced the problem. So Yeah, I want to thank you for this. It was fun. It was nice to see you and meet you again.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you everyone for watching and welcome to the Deployed Engineer podcast.